Recovery has begun. What once seemed lost forever is slowly returning. The years that felt like a long pause were not empty. The time you thought was wasted is coming back to life, but not for everyone. Only for those who felt, deep down, that something important was always meant to begin. And now it finally does. On June 15th, the asteroid Vesta ends its retrograde in Scorpio, marking the quietest, yet perhaps most profound, turning point of the entire month. Vesta doesn't create noise. She moves like a laser beam, precise, focused, awakening the places in your soul that once fell silent, and giving them a voice again. If the past weeks have felt like a standstill, as if life wasn't offering you clear answers, it wasn't a dead end, it was a threshold, the stillness before an inner realignment. And instead of forcing change, you waited, you endured, you protected the ember within, even when it was barely visible. Now it begins to glow again. Why are certain people, memories, or unresolved life patterns returning to your path right now? It's not random. I'll speak more about this soon. But for now, the most important thing is, don't interrupt what has just begun to awaken. All the moments you felt out of place were actually moments of quiet gathering. All those lost years were not the end of your story. They were a sacred pause before resurrection. Now, as Vesta turns direct, the inner flame remembers who you are, why you're here, and why you were never truly broken. This isn't just motivation. This is restoration. The years that felt stagnant, frozen, like your life was on hold, they weren't wasted. They held potential, patiently waiting to unfold. And now it begins to emerge, but not in the way it once did. No illusions, no innocence, only clarity, precision, focus, and perhaps the most beautiful part. This energy doesn't demand that you chase it. It comes to those who stayed loyal to themselves. And what is about to rise from the depths may surprise you. It's not what you expected, but it's exactly what you're ready for. You won't see fireworks. You won't hear a thunderclap of revelation, but you'll feel it. That subtle inner shift, like you've crossed an invisible threshold. And that is the sign. The fire has been lit. This awakening doesn't announce itself with drama or spectacle. It ignites quietly, steadily, with deep, unwavering intent. Once it starts, it doesn't fade. Because this is not a fleeting spark. It's fuel. Fuel meant to last. What's activating now isn't impulse. It's devotion, purpose, and endurance. You're not just entering a meaningful moment. You're stepping into a role that, perhaps unknowingly, your whole life has been preparing you for. And now that the fire has awakened, everything depends on what you choose to do with it. There are choices we make in this lifetime. And then there are vows, silent, unseen, but eternal, promised long before birth. What if this week, charged with strange clarity, isn't the beginning of something new, but the reactivation of something ancient? Not fantasy, not past lives in the romanticized sense, but something encoded in the architecture of your soul, a vow, a promise, a mission your spirit once took on, not yet understanding how heavy it might become. And this is where Vesta enters. In mythology, she is the priestess of the inner flame, the sacred keeper of the temple fire, the quiet guardian of spiritual service. In astrology, she is one of the key asteroids, the symbol of inner devotion, soul-aligned mission, and the holy fire that burns even when the mind forgets. But the path does not. Have you noticed a project, a calling, or a vision you once let go of quietly coming back to life. Something you thought wasn't yours suddenly feels right, sharper, deeper, and strangely familiar. This is no coincidence. You didn't fail your mission. You simply weren't meant to begin it yet. Every delay, every detour, every heartbreak and false start, it was all preparation. And now, as the map unfolds before you, the people, symbols, and encounters returning to your path carry a strange déjà vu. And what once felt impossible now feels doable. Even your body may whisper, "This is it." It doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like precision, the kind that only arrives when you're truly ready. Because what's rising now isn't just a new chapter. It's the task your soul came here to fulfill. Even if you don't remember agreeing to it, the time to begin has arrived. You've done the work. You read the signs. You set your intentions. You cleared the space. You lit the candles. You let go of what you loved. And still, something wouldn't ignite. As if everything was ready, perfectly arranged, but missing the spark. And perhaps the most painful part, that subtle pressure from others, from the world, as if you were missing the secret step, as if the fault lay in you. But the truth is, this fire was never yours to force. Some sparks wait, not because you're unworthy, but because their light is sacred, because they are meant to ignite in divine timing. And now, as Vesta, the sacred keeper of the inner flame, turns direct in Scorpio, that time has come. The waiting is ending. That unbearable space between readiness and ignition is finally closing. And suddenly, the fire is lit, not because you tried harder, but because something ancient has aligned in your favor. You weren't losing your mind for sensing that something big was about to happen. You were right. You were standing at the edge of a fire meant to ignite now. Not before, not later. This moment isn't about finding the flame. It's about realizing it's already here, and your only task is to direct it before it fades. Because when sacred fire lights, it doesn't ask, it acts, swiftly, precisely, without hesitation. And if you delay now, the door may quietly close again. Without a promise, it will open the same way twice. No more signs are needed. The spark is real. The fire is active. This is your moment, not to analyze, but to move. Because the truth is, the flame never waited for your certainty. It waited for your attunement. And now that it's here, the question isn't whether it's real, but whether you'll allow it to change everything. You've been devoted to something for years and didn't even realize it. Not to a person, not to a goal, not to an outcome, but to a mission. A subtle thread that kept weaving its way into your life, returning again and again, even when you walked away, even when it all collapsed, even when it felt like you were starting from zero. That same frequency kept calling. That same sensation. That wasn't coincidence. That was Vesta. Vesta is more than an asteroid. She is an astrological symbol of deep spiritual devotion. She doesn't scream. She doesn't shimmer. She doesn't demand attention. She works silently, precisely, behind the curtain of your life, binding your soul to what it truly came here to serve. And now, as Vesta moves direct in Scorpio, what was invisible becomes undeniable. That thread is no longer a vague feeling. It is a path, clear, irreversible, real. Devotion doesn't always look like discipline. Sometimes it's just returning, again and again, despite everything. You may have thought you were lost, but you weren't. You were being pulled toward what your soul once vowed to protect. And here's the twist no one talks about. That devotion, it isn't to success, not to recognition, not even to healing. It's to continuation, to staying loyal to what makes no logical sense, but has never stopped calling. Vesta always knew your role. She just waited for you to grow into it, not by force, but through remembrance. Now the signals are getting louder. What once felt like a whisper becomes clear. Through synchronicities, symbols, loops, all of it pointing to one thing. You weren't wandering, you were preparing, and now the mission awakens. Not because it's time to begin, but because the part of you that's always been ready is finally stepping forward. Not all protection arrives with fanfare. Sometimes it hides in perfect timing. It moves silently, almost imperceptibly. But now, under the influence of Vesta moving direct in Scorpio, something or someone is stepping into the light, and it may shake you in the best possible way. A friend who reappears unexpectedly, a stranger with exactly the right words, an opportunity that once seemed absurd, but now feels strangely familiar. None of it is random. It's only now that you're tuned in enough to see the pattern that's been forming since the very beginning. You were never alone. Someone believed in you, quietly, when you had nothing left to hold on to. Maybe it was a person you once overlooked. Maybe a moment, a sign, a whisper of fate that now reveals itself as part of a larger design. This is how an ally appears. Not loudly, not obviously, but in stillness. And Vesta, now moving through the most strategic of signs, Scorpio, brings this ally into the open. Not as a reward, but as a reminder. You weren't the only one building this becoming. Now, a message, a signal, a moment of clarity may arrive, and feel as if someone behind the scenes gently guided you here. Because it's true. This energy reveals the devotion you never noticed, the support that was quietly with you all along. You're not just standing stronger now. You're standing with someone who guarded your fire when you no longer could. You were never lost. Someone was lighting the way the whole time. What's awakening now isn't just clarity, it's capacity, a strength that has always been with you. You didn't lose it. You left it in a sacred place until the time was right to return. Inside you is a space, older than your name. And within that space lives a truth you felt in your dreams, in stillness, in the turning points. This is your inner temple, and now it is filling with power. For so long, the noise, the exhaustion, the chaos made it hard to feel. But now, you're not chasing focus. Focus is finding you. Under Vesta's new direction in Scorpio, everything draws inward. The energy no longer scatters. It sharpens, clarifies, aligns. And you begin to notice. Meditations go deeper. Dreams feel fuller. And you can't help but feel they were more than dreams. What felt lost was never gone. It was simply waiting for this exact moment. And that moment is now. You are finally ready to return to your inner seat of power, to the throne of your own energy. This isn't about productivity. It's about sacred focus, the ability to hold your energy, to channel it like a current, rather than scattering it in sparks. It's the difference between lighting 1,000 candles and becoming the fire itself, steady, warm, rooted. The temple is not a place you go. It's a state you remember how to inhabit. And with every conscious breath, every choice to choose stillness over noise, you begin rebuilding that temple, not for anyone else, for yourself. because what's coming next demands your full presence, a presence that can only be held within the temple of your own being. And once that space awakens, the initiation begins. Something subtle yet undeniable is already underway. You're no longer chasing answers, no longer grasping for signs in panic. Instead, you're being drawn, gently but irresistibly, to certain people, places, symbols. And for the first time in a long time, it feels meaningful. Even if the mind doesn't fully understand, the body already knows. This isn't random pull. This isn't spiritual chaos. This is what happens when deep resonance is activated, when distraction fades and the fire becomes visible. Vesta in Scorpio doesn't pull you in every direction. She leads you exactly where it matters. The magnetic field is shifting. What once lured you off course has lost its hold. Your inner compass has tuned into something finer. Resonance. That's why a person you hadn't thought of in years suddenly returns to your awareness. Why an idea you once dismissed now feels inevitable. Why a place you've never been keeps appearing in dreams, in words, in signs that no longer feel accidental. This pull isn't from desire, it's from memory. You're not discovering something new. You're remembering something ancient, something yours. And that's why it feels both urgent and peaceful at once. You're no longer wandering among possibilities. You're orbiting a single flame, a single essence, a mission that's been burning at the center of your life, waiting for you to be ready to claim it. And now that you've felt it, there's no turning back. The distractions go quiet. The side roads lose their appeal. Because once you're attuned to this fire, everything else is just smoke. This isn't a passing pull. This is the call you were always meant to hear. And here's the quiet truth no one tells you. When you get this close to your essence, it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like coming home. How did you not see it before? You used to agonize over decisions, search for signs, pull cards, write until your hand ached, think yourself into exhaustion. You paced your room at night, trying to understand it all. And now, it just comes. You know what you want. You know what you're no longer willing to tolerate. You know who stands with you and who only drains your light. The inner debate is over. All that remains is recognition. But with that clarity comes something strange. Fear. Truth often arrives not like thunder, but like silence after a storm. You expect noise. Instead, peace. And the ego is terrified of that peace. It craves the chaos, the doubt, the noise, because those things gave it the illusion of control. When you were uncertain, it still felt like it was up to you. But now you see, and there's nowhere left to hide. This is what direct Vesta in Scorpio really brings. Not just a revelation, not just direction, but a deep knowing that cannot be explained in words, because it isn't of the mind, it's of the soul. And if, in the first moments of this knowing, you feel alone, don't be afraid. If you feel distant from those still spinning in fog, it's not superiority, it's resonance. Not everyone arrives at the same time. What you feel as discomfort is simply the collapse of an old version of you, the one who was still loyal to struggle long after the struggle ended. For so long, it felt like you were stuck, like everyone else was moving forward while you circled the same questions, wondering why nothing worked. But you weren't behind. You were tuning, silently, steadily, without applause. While others chased speed, you cultivated depth, not noise, precision. And now, with Vesta turning direct, everything that was quietly building within you begins to awaken. But you're not chasing it anymore. You're activated. You didn't just survive the silence, you became wiser through it. You didn't waste time. You transformed it into power. You found clarity that can only be earned in stillness. That's why this next chapter is yours. Not because you're finally ready, but because you are no longer waiting for proof. This isn't a reward for patience. This is the inevitability of alignment. Vesta doesn't arrive by request. She appears the moment your internal rhythm matches the ancient law of precision. And now, everything becomes clear. The thoughts settle, the energy gathers, the mission sharpens. And here's what most people miss. Growth doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like silence, like loneliness, like disappointment. But none of that was a mistake. It was calibration. What seemed empty was preparing you. And now, everything feels different. Not louder, not brighter, just undeniable. You're no longer searching. You're recognizing. The clarity you feel now is not a coincidence. It's the result of every quiet decision you made when no one else could understand why you were still holding on. This phase isn't about trying harder. It's about stepping into the role you've been quietly preparing for this whole time. To use the fire, not to prove anything, but because you finally know. This is your work. Not random, not chosen, unavoidable. This is the beginning of embodiment. And once that begins, it cannot be stopped. The path ahead no longer asks for force. It asks for presence. You are not starting from zero. You are moving from depth. Everything you thought was lost is waiting at the next step, not as a chance to start over, but as the restoration of what has always been yours. Only now, you're finally ready to carry it. This is the moment when everything falls into place, quietly, powerfully, without hesitation.